Hello, welcome to this movement style video. This is the side lying section of the Intermediate Pilates lesson that features in this playlist. We've come into the side lying section now, and we're going to just in a moment roll down through the spine onto the mat. I think in side lying it's very useful to support the head so that the neck is lengthening freely from between the shoulder blades into the crown of the head, rather than as we're lying on the side with the depth of one shoulder here, the head is in a permanently flopped over lateral flexion position, a kind of downward sinking rather than lengthening up and over. So let's come down, ideally with a little bit of support for the head. We're going to draw down, trying to keep that alignment, back of hips, back of shoulders, back of head level, and the zipping up at the tailbone going, broad and wide scoop and hollow already going, strength working around the waist, underside of the rib cage lifted all the way through shoulder joint into the floating ribs, and the breastbone and spine hugging towards one another. So arriving to the mat, we just check hip above hip, shoulder above shoulder. We think about supporting the weight of the head so that the head and neck are aligned, and again that can take a moment or two. And then once we're here, we probably need to work again on working deeper into the core strength, so that essentially this underside of the trunk of the body is supported away from the floor. Crown, sacrum, tailbone, hip joint, knee joint, ankle joint, like that. So lots of deep zipping up, shoulder blade moving down the back, arm connected. We're going to overlay our belt fastening strength by weaving in our small of back, lower back strength, so multifidus, low glutes and glutes pulling up to meet the low back strength. And then raising the leg, spine supported in the core, raising the leg from out of the lower back strength. So now sometimes people find it's very hard to get this underside to work, so you can always hitch the hip up towards the base of the rib cage. So just breathe out, hitch up, breathe in to release, breathe out, hitch up, breathe in to release, and then as you're ready, adding in your leg movement. So keeping the strength here important, rather than pushing the counterweight of the head into the floor. So that's another thing that happens. People tend to, as the leg rises, push the weight of the head and neck downwards. But what we need to really do is get the strength wrapping in around the spine, release the spine, again like the tube of toothpaste being squeezed at the centre, release the spine into the tailbone, and then the leg flows on out as a continuation of the core strength. Now in this particular exercise we're going to challenge ourselves a little bit more. We're going to lift once, lift twice, lift 3 times, and lower. So lengthen the spine, breathing out, lift once, breathing in. Breathing out, lengthen the spine, lift twice, breathing in. Breathing out, lengthen, and breathing in. Breathing out, lift, breathing out, lift, breathing out, lift, breathing in, lower. Breathing out, lift, breathing out, lift, breathing out, lift, and lower. Let's give that one more go. So remember to really connect the leg into the hip, use the gluteal muscles to help you, and lower. Good. So we're going to let that top leg come forward, extend into the underleg. As this top leg comes forward, again, sometimes it brings the hip with it. So it's useful just to keep that knee lifted. Sometimes you can put cushions or pillows underneath it to keep it lifted, but it is important to keep hips stacked, shoulders stacked, again, lengthening through the neck. So underside of the trunk, underside of the ribs, waist lifted. And essentially this lift comes from lifting in the waist, hollowing in the lower abdomen on the underside extra hard, and then lengthening into the leg. So again, the line, crown, sacrum, tailbone, inside hip, inside knee, heel, and coming back. So it's that spine lengthens, core squeezes in around the spine, and the leg flows out from the centre of the core. So it's out breath to lift, in breath to lower. So again, we're going to lift once, twice, 3 times, and lower. So we're avoiding pushing down through here. So breathing out, lengthen once, breathing in, breathing out, lengthen twice, breathing in, breathing out, lengthen 3 times, and lower in breath. So lengthen, 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 and lower. Lengthen, 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 and lower, lengthen, and lengthen, and lower. Last time, lengthen, 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 and lower. Coming down. So then, we already just a little bit practiced a hitch in the hips. So you're using your waist strength to close the space between the base of the rib cage and the pelvis and lengthening whilst you close. And you could, if you wanted to, add in a bit of a flowing arm and releasing. So you're actually seeing if it's possible to go beyond neutral and then into a slight side bend. And that's our basic side bend option. Yeah. And lengthening away. Now, if you feel like opting up, if your shoulder joints are nice and strong and don't have any issues, you can try coming up into a stronger side bend, especially if this is an intermediate sequence, so in theory it's possible. Just going to let the thigh bones lengthen away from the seat and creating a triangle essentially, so the floor and the upper arm, 2 sides of the triangle, so the right angle. And then we need to engage the core strength to create the long line through this third side of the triangle. So it's our zipping up at the tailbone, broad and wide scoop and hollow, fastening the belt, ribs tapering in, and this underside of the body needs to be quite strong. So then from here, we're going to close this space using the core strength. So flow through and the arm can come up and then back again. So you come back to neutral. So squeeze, flow through, and then back to neutral. So the movement passing through the spine, core strength, coordinating the spine into that position. Yeah, rather than that you're pushing up with the hips and the legs. Movement begins here, hitching up, and then the arm just flows through to help you stretch your upper side. So let's do one last one. Through, and coming back. So then here, legs come forward. As long as it's comfortable for your knees, let the legs stay staggered. And that side, that underside that we've been lying on and working, let's reach up, opening the waist, opening the ribs, coming up to come over, keeping your spine supported. Breathing there, really reaching. Might be able to get a good stretch right from there. Breathing, and as you're ready, releasing. And if it doesn't work to do it with the knees folded like this, after all, let the legs extend, coming up to come over. Second side, let's bring ourselves down onto the mat again. So our alignment, back of hips, back of shoulders, back of head level. Our zipping up at the tailbone, our broad and wide scoop and hollow, belt fastened, muscles working around the rib cage, inching the spine down with that support, staying around the spine. So then a little bit of support there to let the neck lengthen. Try to feel the vertebrae of the neck releasing and lengthening from out of the vertebrae in the back of the rib cage, opening all the way through to the crown of the head. So regrouping in the core strength, extra strength, zipping up, lower abdomen, broad and wide scoop and hollow in the pelvis, waist nice and strong, and as well wrapping around the rib cage, etc. So then we can just always practice that little bit of a hitch, squeeze the pelvis up to the base of the rib cage, breathe in to release, squeeze, breathe in to release. So now then, when the leg goes away, it will be harder to hold the waist away from the floor. So again, once the leg lengthens, just practicing this little hip hitch, keeping the spine lengthened, feeling that as you begin to activate the movement through the leg, you're not counterweighting into the head and neck. So again, core strength wraps around the spine. You really suspend the spine within the core, and then you weave in that smaller back, lower back strength. It meets the low glutes and the glutes pulling up, breathing into lower. So breastbone hugs back, spine lengthens behind the breastbone into the crown of the head, and lower. This hip hitch strength stays in place. So now the pattern that we practiced on the first side was lift once, lift twice, lift 3 times, and lower. Now the spine needs to really lengthen in the opposite direction and lower in order to keep that underside of the body off the floor. So I engage the core, of course, but I stretch into the crown, stretch into my heel. I feel the leg anchor back into my pelvis, last one coming up. So lengthen, lengthen, lengthen. I anchor it back in with the strength through here and lower. So then we swap over. So it's going to be that the top leg comes forwards and the lower leg lengthens away. And sometimes people not so flexible, and you just need to check that you've got this line again. Crown, sacrum, tailbone, inside hip, inside knee, heel. And again, the inside of your leg begins on the front of the spine, passes through the bones at the front of the back of the hips here, and connects into the top of your inner thigh bone. So, you know, when you lengthen the spine away from the movement into the leg, it helps you to activate the movement and to get the freedom and the space to bring the leg in line and to lift it up. So we talked on the first side, shoulder above shoulder, hip above hip, this top leg supported if it needs to be, keeping the weight out of the neck, shoulder blades move down the back. You need to initiate that lift in the under waist, lower waist, stretch the leg away, come back. Stretch the leg away, come back. Stretch and come back. Now, the 3 lifts that we practice, so lifting once, lifting twice, 3 times, and lower. So lifting once, twice, 3 times, and lower. Breathing out, breathing out, breathing out, breathing in. And lift, 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 and lower. Lift, lift, and lower. Last set, lift, 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 and lower. Good, well done. So let's bring the legs together again, and we're thinking about the side bend. So it's more of the hip hitch. We're actually trying to really get a little bit of lateral flexion going through the spine, and make sure again that there's room for the neck. So we squeeze here between the ribs and the pelvis, but we're also really hugging the ribs up, trying to bring the hips along a little, and you can flow your arm in, re-lengthen back to neutral. So your hip hitch, but squeeze extra hard, lift up in the underside of the ribs, breathing in to come back again. So flow through the spine, and breathing in, and flow through the spine, and breathing in. Good. So now you can stick with that option if that's where you feel you are, but otherwise we can come up into a side bend on the other side. So if I show you as well from behind, you could probably get a better idea of the strength needed from the upper back. So we create the triangle that we had before. So floor, upper arm. The legs need to come in line with the hip joint. So in this version, the legs come back. When you're lying on the mat, they're slightly in front of you. But now they've come back in line with the pelvis. And then again, the tricky part, as you capture the weight of the spine using your core strength. So you're zipping up your pelvic gland, your belt fasten, the ribs working. And then you're trying to, as well, just really get this connection. So through the back of the upper arm, shoulder blade moves down the back. And then from here again, squeeze the base of the rib cage towards the pelvis, lift up in that underside of the waist, arm flows through, and back again. So again, it's that idea as if you're drawing the shoulder blade down the back in your upper arm, but in reality it stays in position. And you might be able to see there's quite a lot of strength working through the upper back and this underside of the rib cage, and the connection through the back of the arm into the shoulder blade. And through, and releasing, through, and releasing. Last one, we're trying to work through the muscles around the spine, rather than pushing up with the hips and legs and coming back. So then here we lift away in a split kneeling position, body goes up to come over and through like that. Shoulder blades wide, breathing down the back, really lifting up and over, breathing. And as with the first side, if this position isn't comfortable, let the legs extend out in front of you, working that side bend and releasing. So that more or less completes our side lying sequence, but in case you're not coming on into the stretch video with us, let's just do a little bit of a stretch here to release the lower back. So we're going to lengthen from the tailbone to the crown. In theory, neutral spine as you hinge forward, collarbones open, shoulders releasing away from the ears, sitting bones moving away from the shoulders, lots of space between the crown and the tailbone. And we're breathing. Good. From there then we can roll up through the spine. Just hinge forward here as well. Just lengthening. And then again, releasing a little bit of a roll through the shoulders. Just check that the neck and shoulders are nice and released. So thank you for watching this side lying sequence. There is a stretch sequence to come as the last video in the Intermediate Pilates series. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. My name's Caroline and I look forward to seeing you again soon.